Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Psychic Medium Raymond Guzman, and today I'm going to be doing a psychic reading a little different than what I normally would do. This is going to be centered around the Salem witch trials, and this was, like I said, I'm going to be doing a little bit different types of readings, not just celebrities, but it's going to have a lot of, I'm going to be incorporating a lot of new content and going back into history, because I feel like if I go back into history and do a lot of psychic readings or mediumship readings on historical figures, not only am I going to be uncovering certain truths, but also there is some healing for future generations, so that way we can kind of see things from a different perspective and really raise our consciousness, because right now the world is very close, like exactly how it used to be. It's not that much different, except that we are a little bit more enlightened now. But a lot of the things that took place back then in the Salem witch trials and all across Europe and here in Salem, Massachusetts, it also, there's just, it's a global phenomenon, but it occurred with racism in the civil rights movement, with slaves, with slavery. So it's like it hasn't fully left a lot of these injustices that took place. It still is very prevalent in different aspects in humanity and in our consciousness. So I'm going to be covering today the Salem witch trials. I've always been fascinated. I know in a past life I was a witch as well. And so I had origins to the Celtic and to Ireland. And I do have Irish blood in me as well. So this is going to be very eye-opening, because up until this, I did study this in school. We studied the Salem witch trials, but we didn't go into full depth of, what went on. And a lot of it that is documented, I feel like a lot of it is not true. A lot of it is, again, misconstrued and kind of twisted in a certain way by the historians that actually documented a lot of this. A lot of things were omitted, and a lot of truths were hidden. But, for the most part, the site of the hanging trees, and where the witches, these ladies, these innocent ladies that were accused of witchcraft, were actually hanged at. So the main, giving you a backstory for those of you that are not familiar with the witch trials, the Salem witch trials, there was already in Europe the heretics, and basically there was a lot of movement around Europe. And this was in the early 1600s, in which they were already doing, there was witch hunters and people who were searching out people who did or were suspected of doing witchcraft, and they would hang them or they would burn them at the stake. This was occurring all over Europe, and that movement came with the Puritans and with a lot of the people that came to Salem and settled in Salem, Massachusetts. These same generations came from all of that over there in Europe. And so a lot of these principles and fear controlling, mind controlling mechanisms took place. The question is, why did people accuse other innocent women and men of being being witches, or being using witchcraft? You have to kind of keep in mind that the church always has been a power, had the role of having control and power over the people. And I'm not talking bad about religion or trying to, cast my judgment on anyone or pass my judgment on anyone or any certain religion, but I'm just stating the mere truth. There was a lot of control in those olden days in the 1600s, and the church was the predominant power, not the people. And so until they separated church and state, from having that kind of control and power over people. Back then, people used to pay the church and pay, tariffs and taxes. It wasn't to a city government or to a state government. It was paid to the church, and the church was the controlling power. So I feel like a lot of this movement was generated by the church as well, to have control over the public, and instill fear that if maybe you acted a certain way, or you didn't pay your taxes, or you weren't going to church, you were automatically deemed a witch, and your family would suffer the same fate. You would be shunned no, they would be shunned and you would be executed, or tried, go on trial and then executed. So the methods that they did these executions all over again were burning at the stake and actually hanging from a tree. But some of these women, apart from that, I also feel, and I'm going to get into it in a minute. So for those of you that are very sensitive and that are empaths, I'm giving you this disclaimer. This reading may not be for you. I'm going to be covering some things that are a little uncomfortable, things that I already have picked up on my insight that I'm getting. So please be prepared if you feel like you can't handle that, or you just don't, my intention is never to cause you any kind of discomfort. If you're an empath, I'm an empath myself, but I'm trying to learn how to push that outside of myself and not take on a lot of these emotions into myself. So if you feel any discomfort or with things that are maybe considered a little too hard to hear, I'm not going to filter a lot in this reading because I want it to really cover what really happened in the Salem witch trials. Okay, so for those of you that may want to exit, this is your time if you don't want to hear this. So those of you that are still listening, I'm going to cover just only certain people for time constraints of this, and I'll be doing other portions of the other people that were executed on the Salem witch trial, so that you can consider this as a part 1, and I'll actually label that as part 1 as well of the Salem witch trials, and who I'm going to cover mainly in here today. So now that we know the backstory, and now that we know exactly why this was all going on for power, let's get into some of the people that were executed and what I see about them, and I'm going to go into further details as well. Now, you have to understand, a lot of these people back then, there was a lot of manipulation. There was also a lot of men having affairs with other married women or other men's, wives, and there was this promiscuity, but people feared it, and it was happening from the people higher in power that would have been church members. These guys that were married to a lot of these females, they were having relationships outside of their marriage, and there was a lot of fear that they would be discovered. So what would be the perfect alibi to get rid of someone you were maybe seeing, and you didn't want to get caught and get tried or as a witch or whatnot, would be to accuse somebody else of doing that. And what if you were a wife of a husband who cheated on, and that your husband cheated on with some of these women, and he was unfaithful to you? What better revenge than to accuse that woman that he cheated, his mistress, as being a witch? So a lot of these things were actually going on. I feel like a lot that was documented is not accurate. A lot of it may be accurate in as far as like the main people that were executed and the method that they were executed, but there's a lot that I feel like was there's a lot of lies centered around the Salem witch trials and what actually happened. Again, the historians didn't cover everything. So let me get into the next slide here. There were several people, and again, I feel like there's more than this list. This is about 23 or so. I didn't count. Like I said, I'm not trying to go by all of the facts that are documented, but these are the main people that were executed, and there was a lot of people that were just jailed. But I feel like the list is much greater than what I have here. And we have Bridget Bishop, Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Goode, Elizabeth Howe, Susanna Martin, Sarah Wilds, George Burroughs, George Jacobs, Martha Carrier, and then it goes on and on and on the list. I'm not going to read them all. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a part 2 eventually, but I want to cover the main characters that I felt very connected to. So there was a lot of darkness in Salem at this time, in Salem, Massachusetts. There was a lot of people who, like I said, these men were not faithful to their wives. They were having affairs. And these women that were executed, a lot of them were accused unjustly. They were not witches. Some actually were intuitives, and they had these intuitive abilities. But if we go into it a little bit deeper and you ask yourself, why did the universe allow this to kind of happen? Well, through these executions, it created more of an elevated consciousness in a lot of humanity. And so people started seeing all of these injustices and started rising against this. And finally, there was an ending. They put an ending, soon after all of these executions took place, and knew that it was wrong. You can't just continue to accuse people of witchcraft with no scientific proof and no evidence. So back then, when they convicted these people, they had doctors trying to diagnose people as being under the influence of witchcraft, and stories of these children that were seeing, these witches, and they were being afflicted by certain pains and and certain people, and they blamed these ladies as being witches. So there's a lot of lies that went on. I feel like there was a lot of these women that were executed, and that I will be covering today, were executed for either having affairs, not that they wanted to, but these men maybe forced them to. I also feel like there was sexual abuse. This would be rape. There was a lot of these victims that were locked into these cells, and they were raped, they were sexually abused, they were beaten, they were not fed properly. There was a lot of horrid conditions that they had to endure. Very inhumane, very dark, a very dark period of disease. Um, it wasn't a good place to be in at that time. And there was a lot of fear because once you were accused of being a witch, a lot of these people were already, they knew their fate. Even if you confessed or you were against it, you were still going to get executed. That was the ultimate fate. So let me go ahead and get into the next slide here. Okay, so I'm going to cover today Bridget Bishop, Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Goode, Elizabeth Howell. Again, I'm just getting photographs just to kind of have something to go by, whether these are the original photos or or someone else, that depicted them. It doesn't matter, because I'm tuning into the soul energy, into snippets of things that actually happened. So with Bridget Bishop, I get that she was a lovely lady. She had a very beautiful smile, very fair skin. She was someone who was very attractive and magnetic. Was she a witch? I feel like she definitely had intuitive abilities. She could have been more like a natural born witch, and people would automatically know that she had this mysticism or mysteriousness about her. But as far as like practicing, none of these women that I have here do I feel like they were actually practitioners of witchcraft, but they were very intuitive. And so there's a lot of twisted, when you hear the word intuitive, a lot of people nowadays, when you hear psychic, a lot of people tend to associate that with witchcraft or with being witches. But these women were very intuitive and very wise, and I feel like they may have been natural born witches, but not like doing dark magic or dark witchcraft and black magic and things like that. But with Bridget, I do feel like for the most part, she was someone that had a lot of, she liked to get along with everybody. She kind of, was timid. I feel like she was shy, but at the same time, she knew how to have fun. And I do feel like there was a lot of men that would have been interested in her, but whatever reason, she turned them away. But I feel like, there was men that they couldn't be with her, and so they turned against her, and she was accused of being a witch. Again, this may not fall with the historical notes that were taken back, but you have to understand, just like with any scriptures or anything that was documented in time, a lot of things have been stories that have been recycled or retold over time, and they've been misconstrued, and things have been left out. But I do feel like she was innocent, and she didn't deserve, none of these women deserved, none of these people, men and women that were executed, deserved to be executed. It was in a very unjust, a very dark thing, and it created a bad karmic cycle for all these people that were involved in the executions. But when I get into the soul of Bridget, I do feel like she was just, someone who loved flowers. She loved nature. She had that, like I said, she was like a natural born witch, but intuitive. I don't feel like she had any, magic or puppets, or, did things with, to be accused of this. But I do feel like she had a very keen eye, and she knew who to stay away from. And some people, she knew that they would turn against her. I do feel like there was a lot of gossip among all of these women. There was a lot of depression that was going on, a lot of them being more submissive to the men, because men had the ultimate power in these relationships that these ladies were in, and in the actual village, or the community that they lived in at this time, there was a lot of power of men, and the men were corrupt. The majority of these men were corrupt, and like I said, they had no morals. Their values were just they were inebriated. They were alcoholics. There was drugs that were going on even back then, and all these factors contributed to them in this movement, and it added fuel to the fire. So with Bridget, I feel like she did cross over immediately after being, executed, and she did make peace. But I do feel like there was a lot that was not said up to that. I do feel like she would have endured some kind of abuse, sexual abuse, while being detained or whatever they did to her. But I do feel like there were some beatings. There was I see visions of her being pushed to the floor violently. It's horrible. It's horrible, and it breaks my heart to even think that. But she had a secret. Bridget, out of all of the women here that are pictured in this four pictures that I have in this slide, I feel like she knew something. She knew something that would have taken down one of these men that were accusing her of being a witch, but she kept her mouth quiet. And I don't know to this point why. I keep just hearing my spirit guide saying that she knew something, but she just didn't want to say it because she feared that either way they were still going to execute her. So this is something that really, but I do feel like there was a lot of things that would have gone through and done to Bridget, that would have been inhumane and just horrible things. But she knew a secret. She knew something about these men that were in power, and like I said, she was very intuitive. With Rebecca Nurse, I get that she was also innocent. She was very afraid. I feel like there was a lot of anger as well in her, and in injustice, and she did pray to God to save her from all of this. I feel like just she was depressed mentally. Like when she was accused, I feel like she just lost it. Like she wouldn't have really have had any more faith. She felt this overwhelming doom, like this, like when you're doomed, or when you're sentenced to death or to hanging, you're going to be feeling this impending doom. But she felt that, and she knew that it was coming up, and a lot of these people lied against her. Again, just lies. There was just a lot of lies, and I feel like it came mainly from men, but a lot of these men's wives also came through, as testifying or accusing them of being witches. But there was a lot that was going on, and it came mainly from the men in Salem. Again, a lot of these men were very corrupt. They weren't they just, it was like the consciousness wasn't there. Their consciousness, of what is right and wrong and what is good. They were very socially conditioned, very conditioned to fear, and they operated on a level of fear. And again, the universe would have allowed this to happen in order to raise consciousness through that fear, push through that fear, so that people would see these injustices that were taking place, and to stop it, and make the world a better place, and kind of stop it. But let me get into Sarah Goode. Okay, so Sarah, out of all of them, she was a very strong psychic medium. I feel like there was a lot of spirit around her. She would have been a very natural born witch. Now, she had witch abilities, but I don't feel like she practiced anything negative. I do see her working with herbs and like with food, and so a lot of her craft would have been centered around food. But I feel like with her, there was manipulation, there was some lies. When she was accused, it didn't really come as no surprise to her, but I do feel like she was one of them that perhaps to a certain point, she was very submissive to her husband and just didn't really have a voice in the relationship. But I do feel like she did have some feelings of anger towards one of these other females. So I do feel like there's a lot of anger. There's these sentiment of her feeling kind of like, how should I say this? Like she knew who was lying and who was having affairs, but she kept quiet. But there was people that still had it out for her because they felt like she was, just thinking that she was better than everybody else. But she had this strong ability to know what was going on, and she actually had dreams before all these executions were taking place, and she knew. I see that, and I hear my spirit guides, and I hear that she knew that there was these executions, and that she potentially would be one that was going to be accused of witchcraft. So a lot of these women knew, a lot of these intuitives knew, they just knew. But with Rebecca, I mean with Sarah Goode, she knew, and I feel like she also, was very upset throughout her whole life. I don't feel like she lived a very happy life, a very jovial life. There's a lot of loss around her, so I don't know if she had miscarriages when she was younger, but I keep hearing miscarriages, and I feel like, she had some health issues as well, up until the point where she was accused of witchcraft and being executed. Again, just so awful, these executions. It sends shivers down my spine, and it makes me sick to even imagine that this can be possible in the world. That this is our history. These are our ancestors that got burned or got hung. It's ridiculous. Okay, so the next person is Elizabeth Howe. With Elizabeth, she had a lot of problems, emotional problems. She had depression. I feel like she had a learning disability as well. There was a lot of problems that she had coping. I don't feel like she felt like she was like fit in her family. I feel like there was a lot of abandonment issues and issues with her having a voice as well. So a lot of these women that were accused were very sweet. They were very innocent. I feel like they just didn't have a lot of inner power and self-love and self-worth. They were just, whatever they were shown by men, or whatever affection that was given to them, they took it and they ran with it, kind of like it was their everything. And it's just, that's the kind of consciousness that was back then. You could say it was like 2D, 3D, and toggling into that kind of dimension. But yeah, with Elizabeth Howe, she was like numb. I feel like almost like when somebody is very disconnected or numb or void. So when she got executed, I feel like almost like she didn't, she was shocked, and she did cry and whatnot. But I also feel that she was abused by men, and so, like I said, these women were abused. They were hit, they were beaten, they were verbally castigated. They were I even feel like they even poisoned some of these, and rather than right before they executed them, because I feel like there were some stomach issues with a lot of these people in the food that they were given. These women were given. There was poison in some of the foods. So, like I said, there's just a lot of disgusting and lower things that were done in these witch trials, and that were done against these women that were innocent, and it created a ripple effect for their generations, for their bloodlines that continued to grow. So I feel like a lot of these bloodlines that are still existent today, but with a different, last name, but still that bloodline runs through their veins. It's almost like those guys, not these ladies that were executed, but the guys, these men that they created, and they continue to have children, and those children had children, and the generations, if they trace back to the current, the current people that are living, the current relatives, and they trace it back to their ancestors, to these men that accuse these women. I feel like these people are kind of like, I hate to say it in this way because people listening to this may not understand it, but I feel like they're cursed in many ways. It created like a generational curse in the bloodlines of these people that accuse these women and did these. And I feel like a lot of these families would be afflicted with health issues, and they would be haunted by the ancestors, by these women that were executed unjustly. Their spirits, and their ancestors. And yeah, it wouldn't be a good thing. And I think they couldn't see that, or they didn't realize that when it was going on back in the day, that this was going to be the repercussions, and it was going to create a karmic cycle. So these generations that were part of the ancestors who executed these women, I feel like they have bad karma, and you could say like they're cursed, but I feel like they were very much they have a bad generational karma that needs to be wiped and forgiven, forgiven and cleaned, and it kind of holds them back. And but like I said, when we go into the Salem witch trials, a lot of this has taken place in modern day time through racism and discrimination and all the crimes that were committed during the Civil War, and the crimes that were committed by organizations like the KKK and just other horrible people out in the world that are these that they accuse other people of being something they're not. And we face it now as modern day psychics, mediums, healers, witches, light workers. We are still given that same treatment by people of today, that they can't accept us for who we are. They can't acknowledge who we are as people with any kind of abilities that they can't explain. There's this fear still that people have, and so they automatically want to label everyone. And it's sad, but it's good that we can't. But it's like, if people could, they would try to. I feel like a lot of the consciousness of the people here on earth, if they could implement what they did back then, and this is going back to those bloodlines, like I said, they probably would try to do it, and hang people here in the USA, and other countries as well. And I feel like some countries still do that. They do hang people, but if they could, they would. And it's just a very sad thing that we are still being persecuted for being different, for having a gift. And all these women had gifts. I feel like each and every one of them. Sarah Goode was a strong medium psychic. Bridget was an empath intuitive. Rebecca Nurse would have been a healer, and Elizabeth Howe was a healer and an intuitive. So it's like all these women had different facets of spirituality in them, but they just were accused for being different, and there was a lot of lies from men and women, and control and power, and like I said, it was all about manipulation and sex and just horrible crimes that were committed. So this is part 1 of the Salem witch trials. I will be covering some other key people that were executed, and going a little bit further. I just wanted to start it off, and I hope you did enjoy this. If you did enjoy it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Leave me any comments below in this video if there's any other time periods or people that you would like for me to cover. Or anything else that you would like for me to cover, or you have any your own thoughts about all of this, it and how you perceive it to be, because it's very interesting. Like I said, these are just my personal insight that I get from spirit on what would have happened. I'm not going by history, so if you're trying to quote something about history, please, leave that out, because again, a lot of the things that are documented, I don't feel are accurate or 100% accurate. But I'm open to reading any comments from any of you that that are enlightening, or that your thoughts on this whole situation. What did you think about this particular reading? Did you feel like it was an eye-opener? Did you kind of know some of these things as I was you're looking at the screen and you were listening to me? Did you pick up on the same things that I did? I'm very curious to hear, and I do respect your opinions. So if you'd like to set up a private reading with me, I get that question asked a lot. Do I do private readings just for celebrities, or do I do just readings on YouTube for just my YouTube channel? And the answer is no. I do actual private readings of regular people, everyday people, whether you're a celebrity or you're just a regular person. My clients are around the world. So if you want to set up a private reading, check out my website. That's www.raymondguzman.net/shop, and you can see all of the links listed in the description box below. If you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this, please go ahead and hit the red subscribe button, as well as the notification bell icon on the bottom right hand corner of this video, so that way you'll be notified of any future videos that I do publish. Blessings and love and light. Have an amazing day.